Welcome to another episode of Show and Tell Books. I'm Amber,
And I'm Chantel.
and today we're talking about Thank You for Listening. I love this book. Chantel had to listen to me rave about it for weeks on end, and I'm pretty sure she was exasperated by the time that
But it was
her
worth it.
her library copy came in.
So the book starts out with Swanee. Basically, she's going to this like convention that she's subbing for her landlord as like the host for the romance pavilion, is what they call it, which she's not looking forward to because she has moved on from narrating romance books. She now narrates like the books no one else wants to narrate, but she's really good at it, has won awards, all this stuff. Anyway, while she's in Vegas, she meets this guy who is spectacular, very attractive. They hit it off right away. So they have a fantastic one night stand and they part ways, never to see each other again, though she still thinks about him even like a month later when she's given a job proposal. Amber, you want to explain that part?
Yeah, so before she lost her belief in happily ever afters completely. She used to narrate romance novels under a pseudonym, and one of the authors she narrated for recently passed away, and her dying wish was for her to do a dual narration with on her last book with Brock McKnight, one of the biggest names in the romance audio narration, who is also a pseudonym. And they agreed to do this project and get to know each other through emails and text messages. And their banter is top notch, like best banter I've read in a book.
So basically, she started to like somewhat catch feelings for Rock while they're narrating this book. And then things happen, and we cannot spoil the ending because you have to read this book. But honestly, it is, thank you, Amber, one of the best books I have read. I loved it. Granted, okay, let me just say, Amber described it as like a little bit lessons in chemistry. Lessons in chemistry was fantastic, but I was expecting like something bad to happen throughout the entire novel, and nothing at the level of lessons in chemistry did. So you set me up there.
Lessons in Chemistry had that undertone of like women women empowered and like don't just listen to the stuff being shoved down your throat, I guess. Um, And so I felt like there was just a bit of that in Thank You for Listening in how they kind of talked about women's literature versus romance,
Which is
and
so good. Yep.
which was so good. And because both of these narrators don't like the romance genre, they're very against like happily ever afters and happy endings, and just the way that they talked about it kind of felt kind of like the same messaging as Lessons in Chemistry. So it's a stretch. You're right, it's a stretch. But that's what it reminded me of. But you also reminded me that the grandmother character has Evelyn Hugo vibes from the Seven Husbands
Absolutely.
of Evelyn Hugo, which is spot on. She has very much the same energy.
She cracked me up. So I love this book because it takes place in Hollywood. So a lot of the characters throughout the novel are former actors, current actors, producers, like all sorts of everything in Hollywood, royalty kind of concepts you've got. So it was really fun. The grandma used to be an actress. So because of that, like she tells a lot of stories of how, back in her day, and she's actually the one who essentially raised Swanee to follow in her footsteps as well. So which is why Swanee originally went to Juilliard and became an actress, which then lended itself to her narration career. I really liked getting a peek into the audiobook narration side of things, but I learned a ton through it. I also felt very called out during one particular section because I don't remember who it was, but someone basically said like, "Oh, it doesn't matter how you say it because in the end, everyone's listening to it at 3 times speed, so it's okay." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't listen quite that high," but it made me appreciate, I think, a little bit more the effort that people who narrate books put into actually narrating the books because Swanee talks about like discussing character arcs and trying to figure out the accents and like how someone's supposed to feel in a certain moment, so that way she could portray it correctly in the actual narration. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I definitely could not do this as a career because there's so much more effort put into it than
Well,
I thought. So it does, I might not slow down my audiobooks, but definitely I think every time I read an audiobook, I will think about this book, which is kind of
yeah.
cool.
Well, and it's because Whelan, we'll go with that pronunciation. I'm probably butchering it. Sorry. Is an audiobook narrator. Before she started writing novels, she narrated over 500 books
I
and
did not know that.
is an award-winning audiobook narrator. So there's a Q&A in one copy of the book that talks about people kind of accusing her of writing herself into these novels, and she's like, I I can see how you think it's somewhat autobiographical because of like my experiences, but it's not. And I'm like, okay. So I think it lends to there is that peek behind the screen, right? We're getting a glimpse at what it's really like for quality narrators and the effort they put through, especially because Brock admits like he doesn't put any forethought into like
He
the
just
character
reads.
arcs and just reads. And Swanee challenges him to put a little bit more effort forth. And there's a great scene towards the end of the book where he actually acts it out. Um, and the difference in how that is received was just, it was fun.
They have such a good relationship between the two. Even like, so when they're texting or emailing, man, I was laughing out loud, which was not good because it was like 1 in the morning when I was reading this book. But they're funny because their banter is fantastic and witty. And I loved it because you could tell that they had chemistry and connection before they even knew who the other person actually was. Oh, one of my favorite parts was, they'd been texting for a while and they've just had an entire text conversation with some sexual innuendos in there. Um, and I loved that, the next day Brock texts her and is like, okay, this is really awkward to ask, but I do feel like I need to. Are you seeing anyone? Because if so, I completely apologize if I have crossed the line. Um, and I love that he did that like check in, I guess, to be like, wait, there are certain boundaries we should and should not cross, especially if someone is dating someone. And I loved that because that was
Yeah.
so healthy and so professional, but also like respectful.
If you are a audiobook consumer, if you read with your ears, I highly encourage you to listen to the audiobook version of Thank You for Listening because the author Whelan narrates it and she does such an amazing job with different voices for each character and acting it out. So you get that like second layer of depth to the story.
This might be a book I actually go and buy, which for those who don't know, I don't actually ever buy books. Fun fact. Um, I only buy them if I like truly love them. I really think I might actually go buy this book because it was fresh and creative. I'm trying to think of a book that's similar to it. And I'm looking at Goodreads similar books and all that, and they're all horrible imitations of it. Like I don't quite know a book that is like it. Yeah, I have no really words to describe it other than to just be like, read it and tell us what you think.
I mean, and to like emphasize that fact, there's only like 33,000 reviews for it on Goodreads, which when you compare to other books in the romance genre is nothing. Um, but only like 100 and something of those reviews are 1 star, and 900 of them are 2 star, meaning that the vast majority of people who pick up this book rate it 4 or 5 stars. The complaints that people have to it is she has a third person narrator. So if you're used to romance novels, that's different from how the genre is typically written. You either get first person point of view or
Or
maybe
dual.
dual point of view. So to have a third person narrator is different from the rest of the genre and could be kind of,
It takes a minute to get used to again.
yeah,
But I think pro of that is because right now it seems like every book you read is dual person narration, which they're great. But I think they're starting to get kind of old having that. So by doing the third narration, having that like step removed from the main character, it leaves the reader up to a lot of interpretation of how they're seeing things, but also it makes the book a little bit more timeless because the third point narration has been in existence since like the beginning.
I also will say that one of the other complaints I saw a lot when I was looking at the negative reviews for it were kind of about how the author addressed Siwani's disability from her tragic accident. And I'm I'm coming from a place where I don't know anyone with that type of disability. I don't know if the author did a good job or a bad job representing that particular type of disability or how she handled it. But from my opinion and experience, the growth the character had as she came to terms with her injury and life afterwards and the missed opportunity is what made the book so powerful.
Both characters go through like a healing and a coming to terms with something in the past or like a loss or things like that. Because it had that level of healing, it added further depth to the story and to their relationship, but also like the reader's relationship with Swanee.
I liked how she addressed their relationship in that aspect, but I also really appreciated the relationship between Swanee and her grandmother, Swanee and her father, which was a whole nother bag of emotions and experiences. Swanee and her
Yeah.
mother and her mother's boyfriend, like her relationship with her best friend, there are just so many nuances happening that the author took time to address, which I think added depth to the healing story, but made it possible to believe that these characters could actually develop a relationship long term.
I think so. We did a video on Sarah Adams and cheat sheet versus When in Rome, right? And one of our things that we loved about When in Rome, as opposed to the cheat sheet, was the cast of characters that Sarah Adams included and how the characters around them helped them grow. And I think this is a honestly like a next level book or audiobook that tells that exact same thing because the cast of characters, there was not a single character in the book that didn't have a point in the plot, which I loved because they all were important and they all were realistic. Like
Yeah.
every character had flaws or issues or like emotional healing that needed to happen, physical healing too for some of them. But all of them added an extra layer of depth to their relationship with Swanee and to Swanee's approach to everything that had happened and would happen throughout the course of the book. So I love that because it literally felt like it was a real story.
And one of my favorite quotes from the book is towards the end when she's saying, "We are all scarred, not scared." And pointing out the importance of our emotional and physical scars and how they impact our approach to life and noticing like there's a difference between scarred and scared.
It really is like a beautiful book. I guess it kind of in a way reminds me of like the early Emily Henry books,
Yeah.
which we will do a video on shortly as Emily Henry throughout the years. But her first couple books were haunting and powerful and beautiful. And I feel like it's a very similar vibe and echo in Thank You for Listening because it is, while it's not as haunting as Emily Henry's earlier books, it still is very powerful and like emotional, but also like light.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison to make because I think when I first told you about Thank You for Listening, I said it's something like if Lessons in Chemistry and The Runaway Groomsman by Megan Quinn had a baby, it'd be Thank You for Listening. And that's not quite right.
Yeah. It's like you take the emotional healing from like Million Junes, let's say,
Hmm.
with the character grandparent relationship of Runaway Groomsmen, lessons in chemistry with like the feminism and the approach to a topic. And I kind of actually want to say like Taylor Reed Jenkins in
Yeah,
how she's so fresh and original with her plots. Take that and like that approach to Thank You for Listening.
yeah,
I feel like they're very similar. I kind of do think if you liked Taylor Reed Jenkins, probably will like Thank You for Listening. Because while the like writing style is very different, the fresh approach and kind of like the documentary feel of it is there. Like I did
yeah.
feel like I was watching something that was taking place in Hollywood.
Which is great that those authors are the ones who blurbed Thank You for Listening. Taylor Jenkins
That's true.
Reid blurbed it and Emily Henry blurbed it. And I think that's why I picked up the book originally. It was because I was looking for a read that was just as good as Lessons in Chemistry and something by those authors, and it didn't disappoint. It was so refreshing to read it at the beginning of the year and have a substantial story told.
It was 5-star review. I definitely do think it'll be one of my favorite reads this year because it was spectacular. All right. Anyway, let us know your guys' thoughts, your opinions. If there's any other books you think that we should review, just shoot us a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video or watch any of our other ones. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks.